She didn't whisper. She didn't hesitate. She certainly didn't wait for the service to end. The coffin was still suspended above the grave when her voice cut through the crowd like a razor. "That land isn't yours," she said. "Where's the will?" Every head turned. My grandfather's flag-draped casket swayed slightly as the ropes tightened, the metal creaking under its own weight. The pastor froze mid-sentence. The wind carried the smell of wet grass and freshly turned soil. She stood there in high heels, sinking into cemetery mud, arms crossed, eyes sharp with a confidence she hadn't earned. I had never seen her before that moment, but she had clearly been watching me for a long time. Someone near the back gasped. Someone else muttered her name under their breath, but I didn't catch it then. All I knew was that she wasn't here to mourn. She was here to claim. "My grandfather isn't even cold yet," I said quietly. She smiled like it didn't matter. "People like him squat on land they don't understand," she replied. "That property belongs to the community now." Community. She said it like a weapon. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't react the way she wanted. Instead, I looked down at the casket, at the name Chester Thornfield etched into polished brass, and remembered something he once told me while we were repairing a fence in the August heat. "Anyone who rushes you," he'd said, hammer swinging steady, "is scared of what happens if you take your time." So I took my time. The service resumed. The crowd slowly exhaled. She turned and walked away, already dialing her phone, already confident she'd won something invisible. What she didn't know, what no one there knew, was that Chester Thornfield had spent 60 years preparing for exactly this kind of person. And he had prepared well. To most people in town, my grandfather was just old Chester. The man who drove too slowly. The farmer who never sold. The veteran who kept to himself. But that image was deliberate. Chester Thornfield believed invisibility was a form of armor. He woke before sunrise every day for 60 years. Not because he had to, but because routine made you predictable, and predictable people were underestimated. He wore the same faded jackets, ate the same breakfast, and spoke only when words serve a purpose. People mistook that for simplicity. They were wrong. After my parents died, Chester never sat me down for a long talk about grief. He handed me a shovel instead. "Digging teaches patience," he said, "and patience keeps you alive." As I grew older, I realized he was always teaching, just never in obvious ways. He taught me how to read people by watching their hands, not their mouths. How to listen without responding. How to let others believe they were winning. He also taught me paperwork. Every winter, when the land slept under frost, Chester pulled out folders. Maps, deeds, letters from agencies that no longer existed. He treated documents with the same respect he gave tools. "Land fights aren't fought with fists," he once said. "They're fought with paper." At the time, I thought he was being cautious. Now I knew he was being strategic. So when Brandy Hutchwell stood at his grave and called him a squatter, she wasn't insulting a simple farmer. She was insulting a man who had planned farther ahead than she ever would. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and stronger coffee. Harlan Becker had been my grandfather's attorney for over 40 years. He didn't smile when he spoke, and he didn't waste words. "That woman at the funeral," he said, adjusting his glasses, "is going to be a problem." He slid the folder toward me. Inside was a level of organization that bordered on obsessive. 900 acres. Clear title. No liens. No mortgages. No shared ownership. The land alone was worth millions. But it wasn't just land. There were water rights tied to Willow Creek, senior rights, protected by decades of uninterrupted use. Agricultural exemptions renewed without a single lapse. Survey markers placed and recertified every 10 years. My grandfather had documented everything. "Why?" I asked. Harlan leaned back. "Because he knew someone would come eventually." I thought about the woman at the funeral. Her confidence. Her certainty. Harlan tapped the folder. "This isn't just an inheritance. It's a fortress." That night, I walked the property alone. Fence lines stretching into darkness. Timber stands thick enough to swallow sound. The creek whispering steadily, indifferent to human ambition. I realized then that the land didn't make sense unless you understood its history. and most people never bothered to learn. The first letter arrived 3 days later. Certified mail. Heavy paper. Legal language sharpened into threats. The Creekside Meadows Homeowners Association expressed concern about my property. Noise complaints. Environmental runoff. Unauthorized agricultural use. I laughed until the second letter arrived. Then the third. Within a week, the county placed a temporary freeze on all activity on my land pending investigation. Brandy Hutchwell's name appeared on every document. HOAs don't have real power, but they know how to borrow it. They flood systems with complaints until officials choose the path of least resistance. She assumed I would panic. Instead, I filed requests. Freedom of Information Act requests cost less than $50. What came back was worth far more. Emails between HOA board members. Development proposals disguised as community enhancement. Financial forecasts showing profits from land that wasn't hers to sell. Brandy hadn't just complained. She'd planned. Chester used to say the most dangerous people were the ones who moved too fast. Brandy moved fast. Rezoning applications. Media pressure. County meetings scheduled with little notice. She wanted momentum. She wanted me overwhelmed. I did the opposite. I read every email, every attachment, every quiet assumption buried in legal language. Patterns emerged. Developers had been promised access before ownership. Investors were shown renderings of resorts that didn't legally exist. Environmental reports were copied and pasted from unrelated projects. Sloppiness born of arrogance. Meanwhile, the town watched. At the diner, conversation stopped when I walked in, then resumed softer, slower. At the library, the archivist began setting aside old zoning maps without being asked. Small towns don't take sides loudly. They choose them quietly. And they had chosen my grandfather long before they chose me. Brandy thought she was fighting a lone heir. She didn't realize she was standing on ground that remembered every favor Chester Thornfield had ever done. The camera notification came in at 1:47 a.m. Motion detected. North fence line. I didn't jump to conclusions. Wind triggered sensors all the time. Deer wandered through more often than people ever did. Still, something about the timing felt deliberate. When I pulled up the footage, my stomach tightened. A woman stood just beyond the fence. Phone held high. Camera flash off. She moved slowly, methodically, photographing survey markers and fence posts like she was cataloging evidence. It was Brandy Hutchwell. No clipboard. No county badge. No permission. Trespassing wasn't an accident at that hour. I didn't confront her. I didn't call the sheriff. I didn't even save the clip locally. I backed it up twice. Chester's voice echoed in my head. Never interrupt someone while they're making a mistake. She returned twice that week. Each time, she photographed different areas, creek access points, tree lines, old gate hinges. She was mapping weaknesses that didn't exist. Or so she thought. Small towns don't gossip the way cities do. They circulate information. The hardware store owner mentioned seeing unfamiliar trucks parked near my eastern boundary. The librarian quietly asked why the HOA had requested zoning records from the 1970s. The diner cook said Brandy had been holding private meetings with people who didn't live anywhere nearby. None of them asked me questions directly. They didn't need to. They were reporting. My grandfather had fixed roofs without invoices, loaned tractors without deadlines, paid school lunch balances without leaving his name. People remembered. So when Brandy started acting like the land already belonged to her, the town didn't rally around her vision. They waited and watched. The article appeared online before I woke up. Inherited farmland raises environmental concerns. The photos were old. The quotes were anonymous. The implication was clear. I was irresponsible, unqualified, and dangerous to the surrounding community. I recognized Brandy's fingerprints immediately. Same language as her letters. Same exaggerated phrasing. Same sense of urgency. What she didn't realize was that the article triggered something far more important than public opinion. It triggered scrutiny. Environmental agencies don't like being used as props. Neither do county officials who realize they're being fed selective information. The more she talked, the more eyes she attracted. And not all of them were friendly. Harlan Becker, stopped pretending this was routine. He spread documents across his desk like a crime scene. "She's not just pushing you to sell," he said. "She's trying to establish adverse conditions. Noise, pollution, safety risks. If she can paint your land as a liability," Harlan continued, "she can justify intervention." I showed him the footage. He watched it twice. Then he nodded slowly. "That changes the posture of this entire case," he said. "Your grandfather planned for people like her. Now we just have to let her keep proving why." Brandy escalated. County inspectors showed up unannounced. Reports of illegal dumping, wildlife disruption. Nothing true. Harlan compiled decades of Chester's documents. "This is what clean looks like," he said. "I moved into the farmhouse full-time. Places tell you things when you stop rushing." One night, the spice rack sounded hollow. Behind it, a folded legal document, Perpetual Agricultural Covenant, filed 1962. Any attempt to develop would immediately transfer ownership to the state. No appeal. No exception. Chester hadn't protected the land. He'd weaponized it. Harlan read it. "She's already triggered it. Multiple times. Every filing she made proves intent. Violation. Her plan is legally impossible. We didn't stop her. Developers, renderings, millions of promised returns, all on land that legally couldn't be developed. State agencies noticed. Federal agencies noticed. Brandy's confidence evaporated. She tried a final rezoning hearing. Poorly attended. Hastily scheduled. The room didn't believe her. Arrests happened before noon. Fraud, conspiracy, environmental violations, financial misrepresentation. Brandy Hutchwell escorted in handcuffs. Silence. Investors sued. HOA dissolved. County officials resigned. Plans vanished. Brandy never looked at me in court. Sentencing was swift. I leased parts to local farmers. Conserved the creek. Let timber stand. Chester wasn't bitter. He wasn't paranoid. He was patient. He knew someone would come. He just made sure they wouldn't leave. The porch still creaks at sunset. The creek still runs clear. Sometimes I imagine Chester nodding. Not proud, not smug. Just satisfied. Because the loud never win in the end. The prepared do.